14. And her arms? Said Decius once again, in disbelieving tones. Was it mould? His eyes were wide and glassy with shock and rough wine. He took another swig from his mug, trying to drown both the terrible memory of what he had seen and the taste of the previous mouthful. The cavum, as it was colloquially known, made the tabernae of the Brown Bear look almost palatial, but then anything known as the Hole was likely to do that. It was presently situated in a half-cellar tucked in amongst the storehouses near the river, though its location had been known to switch at short notice. It was dark, dingy, and whatever had formerly been stored in it before its most recent incarnation had left a lingering, unidentifiable odour. Its customers did not complain. It was always open, and if you could pay and were not choosy about quality, you could drink until you were sick or insensible, or both. But then the Hole was not particular about its customers either, as long as they had nothing to do with the authorities. In fact, Cassiodorus's gang actually raised the tone of the place with every drink they downed, and they had been doing so steadily for hour after hour. Behind the trestle and plank table in the corner that served as a counter, Pallius shook his head sadly. He had seen some frightened people in his time. On certain unspecified occasions, he had actually been the last person to see them ever again, but this crowd were the worst. Whatever had shocked them, the drink was hardly touching it, though they were doing their best to put that right. And whatever it was, they'd made it quite clear they didn't want to talk about it, except amongst themselves in nervous, anguished whispers. This was perfectly all right with Pallius, who understood that many of his clientele had their little secrets, and he made sure he was seen to scrupulously respect their privacy, whilst unobtrusively keeping his ears open for any useful pieces of information he might, quite inadvertently, overhear. In fact, he had overheard a few words of what Cassiodorus's gang were muttering to each other, and had decided that, this time, he didn't want to hear any more. Back at the table, Strabo's huge head was pillowed in his arms, which were folded across the drink-stained wood before him. "It were the evil eye, Cass," he moaned like a frightened child. "I saw it, and she saw me with it, and now I'm going to die." Cassiodorus reached out and patted his head vaguely. "It's all right, lad, you're not going to die. We're not going to let any heathen Egyptian queen spirit get in the way, are we?" He looked at the others for support. They looked at their drinks. "No, we're not," he said, trying to sound resolute, at least to himself. "We'll just think it over, careful-like, then we'll see. We're not going to let all that lovely gold and jewels and stuff go to waste sitting around in a tomb, are we?" The others looked as though they were prepared to do so, just this once. "No, we're not," he continued firmly. "We work for that load of valuables. It's ours." "It's our console," the doctor said firmly. "Doctor," said Perry, equally firmly over the comlink, "I'm sitting at our console. It can't be." The doctor played his torch over the Oracle of Alexandria again. "Then how is it that it has every modification, every customized detail that I built into it? And it even has that scratch where you dropped your coffee cup. It's not any Type 40 console unit. It's quite definitely ours." "You mean it's an exact copy?" "Any copy as exact as this might well be considered identical. That's just hair-splitting. But significant hair-splitting. It might explain a lot." "Well, when was the copy made?" "When we were caught up in the energy flux tube, probably." He sniffed disconsolately. "And I rather suspect this is not the only thing that has been copied." "But how has it remained functioning all this time?" "Its internal power packs were obviously not drained like ours were, and none of its main control functions are operative." He circled the console, checking the instrument settings. "All that's working is the general memory bank and the telepathic induction circuits. Unfortunately, on a reciprocal feedback setting. That could explain its success as a font of all wisdom. Perry thought of the uncounted gigabytes of information stored in the memory units, all accessible by direct mental link to whoever was close enough and intelligent enough to understand it. Probably, most of it had meant nothing to them. But what they had understood, they had made use of. And how? The doctor was working the controls, and Perry saw information flash across one of the displays faster than she could read it. I'm trying to find out what it has been telling them recently about power generation. It may prove useful to know. Oh, that's most unfortunate. What? They found out about the Tregellan method. Is that bad? It's a means of separating isotopes of elements that are otherwise chemically identical without the cumbersome gaseous diffusion process. So, they're getting into advanced chemistry. What's the problem? The problem is that they are applying it to uranium to enrich the proportion of isotope 235. You mean they're trying to build an atomic power plant? No. I mean, for the past 2 years, according to the records, the Romans have been learning how to build an atomic bomb. Perry was shocked into silence. The doctor continued matter-of-factly. Interestingly, the Alexandrians do not seem to have realized what the Romans are doing, as they haven't pursued that path of inquiry. They seem to be more interested in aeronautics. Perry found her voice. But it's not possible, surely. The doctor's tone hardened. I'm afraid it is. Simple atomic weapons would be well within their capabilities, with the help the console has been giving them. Of course, there'd be rather crude devices with a low explosive yield, say only a few thousand kilotons, but that's a horrible thought. Unfortunately, horrible or not, it has happened. The question is, how far have they got? And then came the sound of feet in the hall outside. A lock turned, and the double doors were thrown open. Inconvenient and pitiless electric light flooded the chamber, illuminating the doctor in mid-stride as he sprinted for the gate in the latticework screen wall. On the jerking monitor image, Perry got an impression of a small group standing in the doorway. One was a handsome, imperious man in fine robes, while standing beside him was an officer wearing the plumed helmet and breastplate of the Praetorian Guard, with a knot of soldiers at his back. There was one addition to their traditional costume, she realized. They were carrying rifles. The doctor skidded to a halt as he realized they were blocking his escape, and looked about him desperately for some alternative. Perry heard 2 voices cry, "Spy!" and "Assassin!" almost simultaneously, and a shot rang out. The bullet ricocheted off a column and whined back across the chamber like an angry bee, making everybody duck. "No firing!" shouted the robed man in a commanding voice. "Don't risk the oracle." The doctor took cover behind the console, like a rabbit seeking its burrow. "Swords only," ordered the officer. "Take him alive if you can." He turned to the robed man. "Please stand back, Dictator. He may be armed." "Can't we talk about this?" the doctor called out hopefully from behind the curtains. But there was no time for talking. The soldiers, keen to impress their superiors, rushed forward, swords at the ready. Almost by reflex, the doctor picked up one of the shallow incense pans and threw it at the leading man, who disappeared in a choking, blinding cloud of dust and ash. The second man cut at the doctor through the curtain, but his sword tangled in the flimsy, clinging material. The doctor sprang forward, tore down the length of curtain, twisted it about the surprised guard, then pulled, jerking the man off his feet. The third guard, less ambitious or more cautious than the first 2, held back for a moment. The doctor picked up another incense pan and threw the contents at him, then swung the pan round to connect with the helmet of the second guard, who had freed himself from the curtain. It made a noise like a gong and dropped the man to the floor again. The third guard lunged forward, swinging his sword, only to have it glance off the curved pan that the doctor now held as an improvised shield. The dictator began to laugh. Blow after blow rained down on the pan, eventually knocking it from the doctor's hands. He leaped back between the draperies around the oracle and, as the third guard followed, pulled them down over his head and gave him a helpful kick that sent him sprawling. The doctor turned to run, only to be confronted by the first guard, who, still sneezing and rubbing the dust from his eyes, was coming at him again. Desperately, the doctor snatched up a length of tousled cord that had come down with the draperies and flicked the heavy knotted end at the man's eyes, making him flinch back. He flicked it stingingly at his bare shins, then at his face again. The guard cut wildly at the cord. His training had not prepared him for fighting with religious soft furnishings. In the TARDIS, Perry watched the madcap fight in a helpless agony of frustration, sick with fear and dreading what seemed its inevitable conclusion. She clutched fiercely at the edge of the console, unaware that her talons were gouging its surface. In the temple, the guard officer exclaimed disparagingly, "What man is this who fights with such weapons?" "I really have no choice," the doctor riposted, between whips of his curtain cord, sounding understandably aggrieved. "Hold," the dictator called out. "Guards, leave him be by my order." The dishevelled guard slowly drew back from the doctor, leaving him swinging his length of curtain cord uncertainly, his eyes darting about, seeking another way out. There was none. "Now," continued the dictator in amused tones, turning to the guard officer, "you do not like this man's manner of combat, Paulinus?" Paulinus looked confused. "It seems undignified, dictator. Unmanly?" He trailed off awkwardly. "But surprisingly effective, though, is it not? Perhaps he could give your guards a few pointers on close combat." Perhaps so, dictator." His face was flushing with embarrassment. "I found it all most amusing. I find so little to amuse me nowadays. Perhaps we can use this fellow as a comic turn in the games." Paulinus suddenly brightened. "Yes, dictator. Of course, we shall have to capture him first. Would you attend to that, Paulinus?" The man drew his sword and stepped forward eagerly. "But of course," the dictator continued, halting him in his tracks, "we must make this dignified. You don't want to engage in anything unmanly, do you, Paulinus? As the fellow has amused me, we'll give him a fair chance." He turned to one of the guards. "You, give the man your sword." With an anxious glance at his superior, the guard edged towards the doctor, reversed his sword, and tossed it to him. The doctor caught it out of the air. It was a gladius, a short, double-edged sword with a heavy pommel and no guard. It was quite lethal in the right hands. "Now, Paulinus, I have heard of your boasts about your prowess with a sword. Let us see some of it." Paulinus stepped forward into a half-crouch, sword extended. His expression was not pleasant. The doctor's thoughts raced. He knew his life depended on flattering the dictator's somewhat twisted sense of humour, and simply surrendering was not an option. He knew he didn't want to kill his opponent simply for following the orders of his egotistical ruler. Unfortunately, he knew Paulinus would quite happily kill him. But most of all, he knew he wasn't that good with a sword. Of course, he had been once. He fumbled with the patch on his wristband that concealed the miniaturized morphic resonator and twisted a tiny dial. Paulinus lunged forward, and the doctor skipped backwards, waving his sword vaguely about to keep him clear. To the doctor, the chamber seemed to blur and grow distant, and sounds became muffled. Paulinus seemed to slow in his advance towards him, his sword moving as though it was cutting through treacle. Within the doctor's mind, a new yet familiar voice seemed to say, "Play a straight bat." Then that was pushed aside, and someone said, Offer him a jelly baby. Are you sure I can't help? And then, do move over, my dear fellow, and let me at him. And gently but firmly the current doctor's personality was pushed aside, and a new, yet also familiar, set of reflexes superimposed themselves upon his nervous system. All Paulinus knew was that, after a few wild amateurish swings at him, a devil-may-care gleam had suddenly appeared in the stranger's eyes, and a mocking smile had sprung to his lips. Then his own sword was turned expertly aside, and it was his turn to retreat before a barrage of cuts and thrusts delivered with a poise and style he had never met before. The terrifying realization dawned that he was suddenly fighting for his life. Just to make it worse, with every other blow, the stranger would utter a loud "Hi!" for no apparent reason. Somehow, it seemed terribly unfair. The clash of sword metal rang louder as Paulinus was forced back across the chamber until he was pressed up against the lattice screen of the inner sanctuary. Then a blow to the base of his sword, from a completely unexpected angle, knocked the weapon from his hand, and the stranger's sword was pressed to his throat. "I suggest," said the stranger with disconcerting mildness, "that you yield, because I really would rather not deprive the dictator of, no doubt, a valuable officer. Now, what do you say to that, hmm?" And he smiled quizzically. "I yield," Paulinus croaked miserably. "Very sensible. And next time, watch your elbow. You're holding it too far out on the thrusts." And he reversed his sword and politely offered it to the amazed Paulinus. There came a slow, appreciative round of applause. "Splendid!" cried the dictator enthusiastically. "That was really most diverting." The doctor bowed in polite acknowledgement. The dictator walked around him, examining him closely as though he were a new species of animal. "You really are the most audacious rogue I have ever seen. Who are you, and where are you from?" "I am called Doctor, your Highness." He remembered the graffiti. "A little premature, but I like the sound of it. Go on." "And I am a philosopher from a small isle in the Cyclades, just recently arrived in Rome." "A philosopher who is most capable with a sword. Not a skill commonly associated with that calling." "I have observed that a sharp sword cuts through the most erudite polemic, and is sometimes best countered in kind." The dictator laughed heartily. "As keen with your wits as you are with your blade, eh? And why were you skulking about in here?" "I had heard of the wonders of the oracle, but was unable to afford the cost of a ticket to view it more closely, nor could I obtain the right to consult it along with other more favoured seekers after knowledge. But your curiosity got the better of you in the end." "Precisely, your Majesty." "There, flattery again," the dictator explained rhetorically to their small audience. "Yet I know what he is doing, and yes, look in his eye. He knows that I know, but he does it anyway. Undoubtedly the finest and slyest rogue in the city. Well, Doctor, what do you expect your clever words to win for you?" "A pardon, perhaps?" The dictator was circling him again, brow furrowed thoughtfully. "No, I don't think that would set a good example. People must not lose their respect for the oracle and what it represents. Otherwise we'll have footloose adventurers streaming in here to try their luck. No, I think I shall simply give you a chance." "Oh, good. A very small chance, mind you." "Ah, in fact, you probably won't survive. But I'm sure your death will be amusing. I always aim to give satisfaction." The dictator laughed again. "By the gods, I believe your tongue will still be spouting a day after the rest of you is cold. Now listen, my merry fellow. Tomorrow my sister arrives, bringing Alexandria's finest gladiator to challenge all comers in the arena. 7 of the best gladiators Rome has to offer are set to oppose him. And you would like me to be one of them? Just so. You shall meet Gandos first. Oh, good, top billing. The dictator smiled. We shall see if you speak so glibly after your encounter. Take him away, Paulinus, and see that he is made comfortable, but well guarded. Might I ask just one favour? The doctor said quickly. Well, might the good Paulinus here help him prepare for the fight? A strange choice. The dictator smiled at Paulinus's renewed look of discomfort. But why not? See that he has all that he needs, Paulinus, and that he is presented ready for the contest in the best possible condition. Now, you had better call some more guards before you escort our precious rogue to his new accommodation. In the TARDIS, Perry sagged over the console, feeling limp and drained after the tension of the fight. Somehow, the Doctor had done it again. At least he had brought himself a breathing space. All through the fight and the conversation afterwards, she had been too frightened of distracting him to communicate. But now, as soon as he was alone, there would be time to plan his escape. With her new abilities, she was sure they could work something out. When she raised her head again to look at the screen, she could see the swinging arms of marching soldiers, and beyond them a narrow street lit by a string of electric lamps. Several carts were visible, some pulling over to let the file of guards past. She could also overhear the Doctor talking to Paulinus. "Listen, scum," Paulinus said angrily. "You may have impressed him with your fancy words. You called him in a good mood and played up to his fancies. But to me, you're a common thief who would be improved by having his tongue cut out. And if I hear any more of your smart talk, You'll do precisely nothing," said the Doctor icily. "For the next 2 days, my well-being is your responsibility. If anything happens to me before the fight, and the dictator is cheated of his entertainment, who do you think he's going to blame, Perry was sure she could hear teeth gnashing. "You made me look a fool," Paulinus hissed viciously. "You humiliated me in front of my men and Alexander." "Wrong. You simply met a better fighter, and it's no disgrace to lose in those circumstances. Besides, think what you can make out of it." There was a pregnant pause. "What are you talking about?" "Think what happens if I win against Gandos." "You won't win. He's the best there's ever been. I saw him fight once, and good. You can give me some pointers on his technique." Paulinus laughed reluctantly. "I'll say this for you. You've got nerve, but I still won't be sorry to see Gandos cut you to pieces." "How considerate of you. Now, tell me what the betting is on Gandos." "Huh? Well, it's all to win, of course. Few patriotic bets on the best of his opponents, but that's very good. Anybody who bets on me will make quite a tidy sum then." "But you won't win." "Really? You didn't fare so well against me. Would you say some points of my technique were new to you?" "Well, and they'll be new to Gandos as well." The Doctor paused significantly. "Now, at the moment, only a few people know that, and if they are wise, they might choose to take advantage of that fact while the odds are favourable. Think also, what better way to expunge any feelings of humiliation if I should win? There would be no shame in having lost to the conqueror of the mighty Gandos then, would there? In fact, you can say what a close fight you gave me the first time round." Paulinus gave a distinct gasp, expressing both irritation and amazement. "By Jupiter, he was right about your tongue. You won't need a sword. You can simply talk Gandos into cutting his own throat for you." A small, heavy door opened in the otherwise blank exterior wall of Ptolemy Caesar's palace, and Ptolemy himself stepped out into the narrow street that ran down by the side of his property. He closed and locked the door carefully beside him, looked up and down the deserted passage, then raised the hood of the nondescript cloak he was wearing and walked quietly away, disappearing into the pools of shadow between the widely set lamps. For a few seconds nothing moved. Then 2 dark-clad figures emerged from the darkness further along the way and stole silently after him.